Hi there. Thank you so much for tuning into the TAP Advanced Training video series. I'm your host, Cole Stewart, business analyst for TAP at Mitratech. Today is a part two from our Formula Basics episode previously, where I'm going to go into a little bit more depth of what you can do with a formula in a much more logically elaborate way. And in this case, we're going to be using other form elements to determine a role assignment. And this example is the role is going to be an approver. And along the way, I'm going to show you a little bit about workflow templates and how to use hidden fields. So this is going to be a lot of fun. So I'd like to draw your attention to this example workflow I've got set up, and this is an offsite approval form. So think of it as like a compliance department form. Some people in your office have budget to go on some sort of offsite, uh, team boosting morale event that you like. And depending on, so the goal of the workflow is depending on which country you're in and what the company's policies are in that country and what the activity is, there's a different approver that has to review and then ultimately approve for this offsite option. So what we're going to do is have a formula that's hidden from the user, operate in the background, assessing the values of certain fields in the workflow. And then it's going to determine a name. And we're going to use that name to populate an email address and use that to make a role assignment for the approver. And then that can ultimately be used to determine workflow routing. So this is a super basic workflow, and I've just got two form fields, and that's the offsite options, which are lunch, a baseball game, or happy hour, and three example countries right here in North America where I'm located in the United States, Mexico, and Canada. So I want to draw your attention first to the form sections that I have here. So the offsite approval form itself as the first section. And then I've got this section, these two other sections that are called hidden and submit. And I think in one of my previous videos I go over, I always create a submit section and then move the submit button there at the very end. So that way I don't need to think about the submit button ever again as I work throughout the workflow template. But this is going to be new one, this section right here, the hidden section. And I utilize hidden sections in probably every single customer workflow I've ever made. The advantages to using hidden fields to store values and functions are innumerable. And when it comes to sufficiently sophisticated workflows, I think of them as a must. I want to draw your attention now to this approver formula field. And I like to appropriately name my fields. So even though these are hidden and they're not visible to the end user while they're filling the form, they're visible to me and to anyone else who might take over the workflow in the future. So they have an appropriate label here. They're in the hidden section, so whoever takes over will know. The user doesn't need to see these. And because I've labeled this as a formula, they'll know this is where they can go to read or modify the logic involved. So what I want to do is I'm going to actually scroll down here so you can see the formula button above my face, because as I'm filming this, I don't see myself in the bottom corner. In my last video, I blocked it with my head, so sorry about that. If we open up the formula, we can see this one is much more complicated than the formula before. And although I can kind of stretch this window, what I like to do is when my formulas are sufficiently lengthy and sophisticated, I like to just come in here and copy paste. And then what I'm going to do is open up my, sorry, I got to move this out of the way. I'm going to open up my text editor. And this is the formula here. So just to throw back to the previous episode, I'm just going to put this down. There is a formulas manual here at the Success Center. And you can find this. There's even a little video, a much more old school video going into the basics of formulas, but you can find the link here. And in this case, we're going to be going over, it's probably the most sophisticated aspect of formulas, is the case statement. And the case statement is essentially a conditional. It's doing an assessment based on the value of form fields and then outputting value or doing the next logical operation. So we have the case statement here. It's followed by a when, and the when indicates the first logical assessment that's going to be made. And this reads pretty straightforwardly. When form element 4 has the value of lunch, so in this case equals lunch, and remember the quotes, when we're talking about strings, okay, so it's not a number, it's a string that we're looking for. So when form element 4 equals lunch, then do this next thing. And so you need at least one logical evaluation. And then if you can follow along here, I've indented this appropriately. So there's a series of whens. In this case, I'm doing assessments of element 4, right? So if element 4 equals lunch, then perform this function. If element 4 equals baseball game, then in this case, just output this value. And at the very end, there's this else. So you need to have at least one when and an assessment and at least one else. And the else can be the most basic output possible, and that's just an empty quotes, empty single quotes, which is an empty string, which equates to having no value. It's the equivalent of saying the field is not filled. So in this case, what I'm doing with this formula is assessing the value of element 4 for 4 different circumstances. So there's these 3. So again, remember, I'm just going to go back to my workflow here and show you from the form. So element 4, remember this is where we get the element number. When it has the value of lunch, baseball game, or happy hour, those are the 3 options. So when it has those 3 options, we define explicitly what needs to happen. So let's take a look at this first one. So after this then, I did something that might not seem quite obvious that you can do at first, but I just created another case statement. And this allows me to perform a second tier evaluation after we determine this one to be true. And in this case, I'm assessing a value of the next form field when at form element 6 equals United States. In that case, we're going to output the name Cheryl. And so this is that other field with the country options. And so there's Mexico and Canada. If it's Mexico, we want Javier. If it's Canada, we want Jacques. If element 4 was baseball game, well, it doesn't really matter. If you follow the logic of this, it's kind of saying we don't really care what country. As long as element 4 is element 4, we're outputting the name Suzanne. And then we've got the happy hour option, which again makes an assessment based on the country, if it's United States, Canada, or Mexico, in which case we want Sarah and Maria, or we want to output an error value in the case of Canada, because there are no happy hours in Canada. just in this fun example here. It's just so I can show you how TAP can handle not having the correct value. So what I'm going to do is just hop back over to the workflow, and I'm going to open up a preview window. And so you can see we've got our offsite form, and then the hidden section shows up next. So if I select lunch, we get no value, right? So let's look at the formula. I've got lunch. However, form element 6 doesn't have any of these 3 values. Form element 6, in fact, so none of these are true. It's not United States, it's not Mexico, it's not Canada. So this must be true. Or rather, this is the course of action. If none of my clearly defined options are true, then we fall back on this else statement. And that means there's no value, and that's what we see. We see no value. However, if I select United States, we get Cheryl, just like the formula defines. And so what I have is a pre-population going on in the background with a grid data source that says, if the approver formula value is Cheryl, then I want you to pre-populate these 2 fields with the matching value in the data source. So in the data source, we've got Cheryl as a name, and this is her email address. And as if you might imagine, this approver email field is what we're using to define the approver role in this workflow. So if we play around with this, if I go Mexico, there we get Javier. If I select Canada, then I get Jacques, right? So all of this is following the formula as I've defined. And similarly, if I go baseball game, we're going to get Suzanne. And it doesn't matter what country I select or no country. It's going to say Suzanne because that's the way this formula is set up. It doesn't care what country it is. It doesn't do a second tier assessment. in the case of baseball game for element 4. But if I go to happy hour, then we don't get a value unless we select from here, right? So then we get Sarah, then we get Maria, then we get an error here. And this is important because the subsequent stage of this workflow is assigned to the approver role, and the approver role is defined by this email field. So if I try to submit this, I'm going to get this standard error that the form field approver email associated with the role approver must be defined. So I can't fill that out. But if I switch this to a valid answer, so Maria, then it submits, and we can assign Maria as the approver. So we're going to follow up in our next video on this workflow, and I'm going to go into a little bit more to the next stage, which is hiding those formulas and approver assignment fields from the end user, and utilizing workflow templates to set that condition and the pre-population onto the stages. So we'll follow up with that in the next episode, and thank you so much. I hope you have a great day.